But everyone, my name is Justin Sarachik. I am the editor-in-chief of Rapzilla.com. This has nothing to do with Rapzilla. This has everything to do with me. And this is called the That's Interesting, Tell Me More live podcast. This will be on Spotify and SoundCloud, Apple Music, and all of that. But this is the nice visual that we can get. And before me, right in front of me, I have Jameson Ketchum, an author, a music journalist, a big music fan, and does lots of publicity, PR, and everything, kind of like things that I've been doing my whole life, and he's been doing them mostly in like the rock scene, and I've done a lot of those same things in the hip hop scene. But yeah, when did I meet you? I meet you on email maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah. How long were you at Breathecast?
That was about 2 years, and then the Christian Post, that was all under the same thing. That was like 4.5 years.
Okay.
So I think I worked with you to get the bad Christian podcast guys, Emery. And I saw your email come across on the Rapzilla thing. And I was like, hey, I know this guy. And this seems like a really cool idea for a book. So it's good to reconnect with you, man. So for those watching, I gave a little introduction, but I'm sure you could do much better. Give an introduction of who you are, what you do, and why we're actually talking right now.
Yeah. My name's Jameson. I wrote a book called Name Dropping that came out just this last July, and it's kind of the culmination of about 12, 13 years of working in the music industry, interviewing bands, doing publicity, touring, kind of everything in between. So I started kind of writing down some of those experiences because I felt like I was starting to forget them. And then after a while, I thought, if there's a way I can connect some of these stories into some sort of narrative, there might be a book here. So I think I've done it.
Yeah, you have. And it's so funny. It's like, and I'm sure you've had this thought a million times before you actually wrote it, that you're like, wow, this has to be a movie someday, or wow, this has to be a book someday, because like no one will ever believe these crazy stories that I have. But now you actually, I always have that idea, but you know how it goes. And you were actually like, you know what, I'm actually going to do it. And you did it. And it was so cool to kind of just read through your whole story from beginning to end. And as I was messaging you on Instagram, I'm basically reciting your own book to you, which I'm sure is the same effect and the no-no that we tell people, like when you say the lyrics to the artist who wrote them.
Oh, I was excited.
You can't help it though. You just can't help it. And now I get it. I understand. So with that being said, so many of these situations and experiences I've had, much of your book caters to, or many of books that are written cater to artists that are actually performing and on stage, and you want to learn about their life and their biography. And I think you did a good job of kind of going behind the scenes and painting the picture of not the person on stage, but maybe actually the people who help get them on stage, or the people who kind of elevate them through the press and through the media for them to become something. Like the behind the scenes people are the forgotten rock stars that actually help make the rock stars. So do you feel like this book is a love letter to kind of that behind the scenes, the forgotten rock stars, as I said?
Yeah, a little bit. I think it's to smaller bands for one, and then the behind the scenes people. I know that I never like had any desire to be in a band or be on stage or anything, but I wanted to be involved and like be next to it somehow and try to figure out like what's the thing that I do and hopefully do well that can contribute to like what an actual performer is doing. So yeah, somebody else too said like, yeah, it's like a love letter to those experiences, and then to really just as a whole, that time of life. I think I wanted to clear that out of my head a little bit too, to figure out what my next thing is going to be. So I thought, what better way than to like put it all down on paper, so it's concrete, like I have it to refer to if I want to, but so it's out of my head a bit, so I can do whatever's next. But yeah, like you said, it's still that love letter to behind the scenes, but then to smaller people behind the scenes and smaller bands that are like really out there grinding it, really like, spending the night at Walmart parking lots and stuff just to make $50 that night. Like those bands are becoming more and more known. I think not just like in the fame way, but I think that experience is becoming more known. Whereas, especially pre-internet, it was just like you were either a kid in your garage or you were Motley Crue. Like we didn't. I don't think we knew that there was like between that.
Yeah, yeah,
So I just like the idea of showing that between part a lot more.
yeah. And sometimes $50 is like a win, because
Oh yeah.
there are times, and like when I was in the band, we would play shows and we would just be happy people were there.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've certainly been to shows and been a part of shows where there was, they're playing to the sound guy, and it's yeah. I mean, it's disheartening as just
Hmm.
someone who was on tour watching it, but so I can't imagine being the person performing and being like, man, like really nobody cares right now. Nobody cares tonight.
Yeah, it was like $50. Well, cool. At least we can all split $10 for everyone who made the trip to
Hmm.
play in the band. But and those are the stories you don't hear about. Like when you're mentioning all those bands in your book. You're taking back Sundays, brand new, Yellow Card, Fall Star, the band that you were going with. Like there were nights probably in the very beginning where I think you wrote the moment where the guy in the band punched the ceiling. He's, why are we here?
Yeah.
Why are we doing this? And the ones that stuck it out, you know, became who they became, and it's not easy, man. And I feel like it's the same thing, um, even in journalism. You know, you chronicled your experiences working for free, being the editor of an entire magazine, but for free. I've actually done the same exact thing. It's like, this is my magazine. You have all this pride. You're spending all these hours, and you're not making a dollar. And you're like, but eventually, you're just like, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing this?
Oh yeah, and I mean, especially early on. I mean, that you have to pay your dues and all that, and so it's you don't. Of course, there's a party that doesn't want to complain about doing stuff for free because you're like, well, yeah, I'm just starting out. That's just how it goes.
Building.
But yeah, it's still a weird thing to be like, wow, I just got to talk to like my favorite musician of all time, and put this article out about it, and there's like no rumbling, or there's no like response after that, or you're not like waking up then to like a paycheck or anything. It's just like, all right, well, back at it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That that that's like a super good feeling for an amount of time when it's like,
Hmm.
yeah, I'm speaking to all my favorite artists, and then eventually you're just like, all right, so I spoke to all of them, so now what? Do I get paid? Like, like what do we do?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's so I think after a while, it definitely became like, all right, well, like certainly the payment is the experience. The payment is the like
Of
resume
course.
building of it all. And you hope that one day that all kind of adds up and stacks up to jobs. And it certainly did for me.
Hmm.
Never, never at some Kanye West level or anything like that. But uh, I'm still happy, of course, with, everyone I've talked to, and being able to put a book out that's like, here's all this weird stuff from the
Yeah,
last 12
absolutely.
years. Yeah, of getting to talk to people I would have never thought I would ever, even meet in passing and stuff. Getting to work with bands like Emery, like I have to remember all that's pretty surreal.
Yeah, I know. I used to kind of be in more so of the rock world like you when I was doing the magazine stuff. I was just another one of your competitors, I guess. If you ever heard of Broken Records magazine, but we were we covered like a lot of stuff. Like it was pop music. We for some reason we were able to get a lot of people from American Idol, I guess, who were just kicked off the show.
Yeah,
We were like their first interviews. Um, but yeah, it was just another one of those things until I went into the hip hop world. Um, but one of the best parts about like what we do and working with artists is building those relationships with the subjects, of your stories and of your interviews. But like, how do you in your mind delegate between business and the relationship? And do you have any stories of when one of those things was messed up due to the other? Like the relationship is messed up because of the
yeah,
business portion was messed up because of the relationship.
yeah. Ah, boy, I think I've been fairly lucky with that type of thing. I mean, I can think of one or two things maybe that where you get to be friends with someone that you're working with, and kind of get to be more personal friends, and then it comes down to something like, hey, how come you didn't give me a heads up about like this tip or that band or what, like,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, then you realize, oh, you shouldn't blur these lines too much. And at the same time, I've had experiences where I did make friends with someone and I was really happy about it, and they did kind of tip me off to certain things, or you know give you sort of some backdoor information. So thankfully I didn't have anything that like blew up in my face too bad about that.
Yeah.
Touring with people that I was really and am still really close friends with, that, I mean, once in a while there'd be kind of a little bit of a sticky situation. Usually it's more of just, hey, we've all been together for weeks, not showering in a small van. We're going to get on each other's nerves kind of thing. And maybe I don't want to talk business right now and vice versa. So a little bit of that, but that's everyone, especially in that portion of my story of touring and stuff, that band Fallstar that you referred to, everyone's so incredibly open, probably to a fault in that band. I think some of them might be in here, but almost to a fault, but in such a great way where conflict didn't come up that often, and when it did, it was
awesome.
Fairly quick. So hopefully that's what you meant by that.
yeah, and there's the boundaries, and as the journalist, you're always afraid to, like, once you spoke to the person you're supposed to speak to. I think you had a line about it. It's like, okay, you text them the story or whatever, they say thank you, if they even respond at all. Right. Now, are you allowed to text them again, like at another time?
Oh,
are
right.
are you friends now, like depending on how the interview goes? So that's always kind of like a thing that I'm trying to figure out. But then I always look at it this way: these artists aren't afraid to text me at 3:30 in the morning when I'm in bed saying, "Hey, bro, you got a minute?" And I'm just like, no, I'm sleeping.
Yeah.
So I was like, I shouldn't be afraid to necessarily text, certain artists if you need to. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, yeah, that's always a fine line for sure. I mean, I do feel like I've had a couple interviews, and usually not the very first one, but a few interviews where maybe after 2 or 3 times, you're kind of like, okay, like we hung out for a while afterwards, or like we met up, and hung out afterwards or something, where it doesn't feel as strange. And there's artists too that I'll text every once in a while, like if they put a new album out, or they just do something big, and just to say a quick, like, hey, just wanted to say, this was really great, really enjoying it.
Yeah.
And yeah, to never get into a big, like, hey, how come you're not responding or something? But I want to be able to be supportive in that way. And thankfully I've never had anyone be like, who's this? Or not, knock it off.
Can you stop? Can you stop?
Yeah.
Please? You've had it happen to you. That was a good story in the book. I won't spoil it. You have to read the book. The journalist being harassed by the artist, but you made up, right? So it worked out.
Yeah. Thankfully, all good now. I debated putting that in the book. I don't mention who it is, of course, but yeah, I was like, do I need any sort of like negativity in this? And hopefully hopefully it's funny though too, and to show that like weird stuff like that does happen. It's not all roses, as you know.
Yeah. Did you have like a couple of stories that you were like, yeah, there's no way I can put this in the book?
Yeah, I had an artist reject one. Only one out of all. I mean, and again, if you haven't read the book, it's not like it's a big, gossip, bunch of gossipy stories or anything. And there's only 1 or 2 things that are kind of semi-negative, even because I didn't see the point in that. But yeah, I had an artist reject a story, and it was fairly negative. But the spin I wanted to kind of have on it in the end was more about me being inexperienced, and it was a really early on story, and I really wanted to put the blame kind of on myself in the end. But of course, if they're not cool with it, what's the point of fighting for that? So
right.
Yeah, it was a bummer. It was like a big name, and it was like a story I thought was important to show. But again, it's not worth a bunch of emails and texts back and forth being like, come on, just let me say something a little bit negative about you. I swear by the end it'll be fine.
Let me live. So one of my quest as a journalist, and it was also yours, was to try to interview all of your heroes, all the people you looked up to and listened to. You're like, well, let's just go talk to them. And for the most part, you were able to do that. I've been able to do that somewhat. Who are some of the names, besides that elusive author that you only got one response from?
Mm-hmm.
Who are some of the names of people that that you just missed, or you were just never even able to come close?
Yeah, right behind my phone where I'm talking is Jimmy World's album Invented, and I'd say Jim Atkins was always on that list, and come close here and there, but yeah, that's never happened. As far as like if you asked me to put together a list of like the 5 or 10 most important bands to me, they would certainly be on there. And most of those names that I could tell you I've already talked with or had some experience with.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jim Atkins would be on there. The goals that I started with was kind of like if I could ever see this band live, and then it turned into if I could ever meet this person backstage kind of thing, and it evolved from there. So there's people that I've done like phone interviews with that I'm like, okay, well that was great, but I want to sit down with them face to face. So like Davey Havoc from AFI, I've interviewed him a bunch of times, but just like in person, just always fell through. So I think probably Davey Havoc, Jim Atkins, that might be. I'm looking around at my merch in my room.
Yeah.
I think that might be it. Those would be probably the 2 biggest ones.
You got to pull through the CD binder and just
I'm like looking at my vinyls down here. But yeah, I've been so lucky to have so many of those. And actually, you know what? Sonny from POD, who I know you're a fan of, same thing. Where
you've never interviewed him?
Not in person. During the pandemic, I did a FaceTime interview with him and Ryan Reese. And so I have like a screenshot, of us chatting, but that was the closest to like in person I've gotten. So you'd be up there for sure.
Yeah, that's funny because Sonny, I have one of everything with. I have one on the phone, one in person, one on a Zoom call. So that was awesome. I was able to complete like 3 different stages. One of mine, and you've done it a whole bunch of times, is Mike Herrera from MXPX. I think I got a return. You know what? Because of the lettering in the comments, I wasn't able to tell what I didn't see funny. The hat. I noticed now. I came real close one time where I think I got a response from like a publicist or whatever, and they were just like, "Who are you with? What do you want? What are you doing?" And then I was like, I put in my request, and then I never heard back. And I was like, "Oh." I got him to retweet me once, but it was just I couldn't get the interview.
They have a tough camp for some reason nowadays, and I think. I mean, Mike, obviously, too, like, Mike just does everything. I don't think that guy ever sleeps, so I wouldn't be surprised also if it's just like, I'm just going to get real picky with everything I do all the time, because he just seems so go now.
Here's a funny question, and maybe you don't have an answer for it, but how many times have you burned yourself telling a friend about an upcoming interview or a chance to meet an artist at a concert or something, and then it doesn't happen?
Ooh. I know that somewhere along the line I learned my lesson and stopped doing that.
Yep. You have to learn the lesson to do it.
Yeah. So it probably only happened a couple times. There was a few times where, so Chris, who sings for Fallstar, for a long time, he would come with me to shows and be my photographer and videographer and stuff. And so there were a few times where we'd meet up and I'd be like, yeah, the guy said he's going to be here at 7 or whatever. And I keep getting delayed. And usually it would be someone that Chris was also a huge fan of. And so a couple times that happened where they just kept kind of putting it off. And then Chris is like, sorry, I got to go. Like, I thought it was going to be at this time. So that I certainly feel the worst about like having someone come hang out, potentially work with me at the show, be a big fan of the person, and then be like, sorry, like, I'm willing to wait another hour because I got the time. I planned for it. But like, yeah, a few times that happened where he was a big fan of somebody and he's like, oh, like, I'm so stoked to just be in the room, and to do like the photos and stuff. And then I don't know if it ever fell through, but certainly got delayed enough to where he's like, I can't, I gotta go. And then, I send him a picture later, like an iPhone picture later, like, oh man, like 15 minutes after you left, it all came together.
Yeah. It's happened like even where like, I don't even tweet or anything that I'm interviewing the person.
Yeah.
Until I interview the person. Because I was even getting burned like that. Like, oh, I have this interview set up with, so-and-so today. And then they just never call and I never speak to them again. And it's just like, now I look like a dummy. And then people are like, hey, where's your interview with this person?
I did do, I will say, as an embarrassing one, after an interview once, after a phone interview, this is so dumb. I'm like embarrassed to even talk about it now, but I got on Facebook. It was just like a really bad interview. The guy was like really short with me, like kind of
the worst.
Yeah, bad, like short and like not good answers, like just all around. I was like, what? How can I use this? What am I going to do with this thing? And I got on Facebook and made my status update like worst interview ever, and that was all I said. And then I get an email about 5 minutes later from their publicist that's like, "Hey, don't forget we're friends on Facebook." And then she was, of course, super nice about it, and she was like, "What went wrong? How can I, do you want to talk to somebody else in the band?" Like super accommodating, but I was like, "Oh, that was so dumb of me."
Yeah, it's you always know the interview's not going well, like when you've gone through like 8 questions and it's been 5 minutes, and you're just like, oh
Yep.
no, and then you're scrambling to come up with anything you can, and you're like, this just isn't gonna happen.
Yeah,
Uh,
especially for a podcast that you're like, this needs to be at least X amount of minutes here.
oh, that happened to you on a podcast?
Thankfully, not that one. That
Oh,
has
okay,
happened to me
yeah,
before. Yeah, but
yeah,
something like that. If it was a podcast and it was that bad, I think you would just kind of cut your losses and be like, all right, I don't think you want to be here. So
yeah. We'll move on. And a lot of times it's like the person you're expecting to be one way, and then they're a completely different way. And
Mhm.
maybe the interview's not so bad, but because of how you imagine this going, like this is my hero, my idol, whatever,
Yeah.
and you're like, wow, that really sucked. Like that was super disappointing.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've had this experience too. Like I've walked out of ones where it was somebody that I was really looking forward to and someone I really looked up to, and I was like, it was fine. It was maybe subpar. But then you kind of look at yourself and you're like, well, what did I expect? Like I built this person up so much. Did I think they were just going to be like spouting poetry and wisdom the whole time? Like,
You put them on the pedestal.
yep, and they didn't deliver.
Now, one of the things I found super relatable about your book, and you kind of touch on it a little bit toward the end, because I'm experiencing this 100% now, where you have this feeling that like music is your job, so you can't really enjoy music anymore.
Mhm.
Like that passion and that connection that you had to it is now connected to like this is my living, and it really takes like something super special to like move the needle and excite you.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that's like a sentiment you've heard from a lot of people in the industry and like in our
Mhm.
shoes. Is there like anything that you do, or even side work, something totally unrelated that kind of helps, shift those gears? Like what gets you excited again?
Yeah, I wish I would have, I think, listened to my current own advice about that over the years and had a hobby that was unrelated to music. I mean, I always enjoyed sports and the gym and stuff like that, but I, yeah, I don't feel like anytime that I would get into something else, it felt like, well, if I'm going to put time into this other thing, what if I put this time back into music? And then I'm like ahead of everyone else. That was always like the weird justification for it.
Yeah,
So other than like the stuff kind of that every human being is into, like movies and TV and stuff, like I felt like everything's still connected to music somehow. Like if I eventually when I started the Godspeed podcast with a friend, like eventually when that got going, I was like, well, now I have this medium where I can maybe like even talk to authors or actors or comedians, like to get involved with the other stuff that I enjoyed in life. But at the same time, it all still tied back into music because those
yeah,
were the people I already had contacts for.
right, right, right.
But yeah, for every 10 musicians that are on the podcast, there's maybe one author or actor or something. So music just always pulled me back in for sure.
There was always, yeah, you always, and then when you feel like at your lowest, there'll always be like some new artist or some new song that you hear and you're like, oh,
Yep.
thank God.
Yeah.
Thank God you just pulled me back in because I was ready to be out.
Yeah, and I talk about that in the book. Like there was, I mean, that happened a lot of times, but a
Mhm.
couple really major times where it was like, all right, I really think I'm wrapping this up. Like this part of life might be done here. Yeah, and then bands like Let Live would come along. More recently, it's been Can't Swim and Selfish Things, and then bands that you've liked for years, like Taking Back Sunday or The Used, who are still like going so strong and
Yeah,
still putting out like really solid albums. And so yeah, there's always something, and I have to think that that's like by design.
yeah,
I can't imagine there being a long enough drought of music where I'm just like, okay, like officially over. But
yeah.
I don't know. It could
Can't
happen.
escape, can't escape it, man. You don't dive too much into hip hop in your book, except that funny experience with Machine Gun Kelly. Do you have any other like hip hop experiences or artists that you've worked with that maybe you didn't touch on in the book?
Not that I worked with. Another guy I really like is Hyro the Hero. You know him?
I've heard of him.
Yeah, he was a guy that did early on. Maybe he still does, but early on he did a lot of sort of like remix and mashup stuff with like he had a song that was sampled like a Circus Survive song. So he
Oh,
was
that's
like,
cool.
yeah. So I had never seen a rapper do anything that was collaborating with these types of bands. Now we have stuff like emo rap. We have like Nothing Nowhere doing songs with Dashboard and stuff, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, I haven't worked with any hip hop artists. There was like a time span where I really wanted to just to like kind of learn another genre and learn another side of things. But I also knew that I just I didn't have the drive, I think, for it. And then I really didn't have the knowledge.
Yeah, you have to start over. I've had that thought so many times too. It's like, I know how to write, I know how to interview people.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm a pretty good journalist. So then you like apply or you go to wherever that other thing is, and it's like, all right, now what's your knowledge on whatever this is? And you're like, nothing. But it's like,
yeah,
I figured it out before though. Like maybe I could figure it out again. But you just when you lack that confidence as a journalist though, it's hard to like really get passionate and push through and feel like you're part of it.
Yeah, and there's some stuff that I think is universal as far as who you're talking to. Like, I had a big I had a big push a few years ago where I was like, okay, like I just want to try to get some rappers on the podcast, and so I remember like I pitched to like DMX's people and Warren G and like just pretty much all the old school dudes that I could be knowledgeable about.
Yeah.
Years and years ago, I had what I hope to say was an almost interview with Eminem. Which, yeah, of course, like anybody would be so stoked about that. I had the band Discrepancies on. Do you know them at all? From St. Louis.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, they're incredible. But yeah, so I dipped my toe into that at least for interviewing because I thought, like, I interviewed people from like American Idol and stuff. Like that's a far cry from the Warped Tour scene. So I thought if I can branch out in one way or another, great. And if I can kind of find a connector there too, where I'm not having to go super deep into their catalog or super deep into hip hop knowledge because I would be found out real quick. But yeah, the classics, people like Eminem and DMX and all that, I was like, I'll what are those guys doing? Of course, Eminem's doing a lot, but like DMX at the time,
probably busy.
Eminem was a little busy, I think. But DMX 4 or 5 years back, I was like, oh, like it was easy enough to find a contact, like. Yeah, let's Ja Rule. I think I just shot for the moon with a lot of those guys at the time.
Hey, you got to give it a shot. You never know, right? Mm-hmm. And then sometimes you get the emails from those people that you're never expecting. You're like,
yeah,
why are you emailing me? Okay, cool. I must be a big deal or something that they want to talk to me.
Well, and when you get those ones too that are like, man, I would have never thought to hit up this artist, or I know who this is, but I'm not a fan. But if they're asking me, it's kind of interesting.
Yes.
Aaron Carter was my biggest example of that. It fell through last minute, and then he went off the deep end. I wish that would have happened. But yeah, you get hit up by these random ones that you're like, oh, that's not something I'd usually cover. But if you're asking, like, I could, and I spent a week. Now I have all this Aaron Carter knowledge that went nowhere. So.
Well, just in case you're right.
Just in case he calls again, yeah.
You're prepared for like trivia night at pop night at like the local bar or whatever.
That's right.
One of the questions I had, do you feel like working with, and you've worked with bands of all genres or whatever, but you've worked a lot with Christian artists. So has that jaded or changed the way you look at faith, like when you see things from an industry perspective?
Not too much, I don't think. I haven't worked with anyone that's like super CCM. I mean, I certainly grew up on like DC Talk and Newsboys and all that, Audio Adrenaline. So getting to interview like a lot of those guys, I think has impacted me mainly because you look back to when you're a little kid listening to stuff like that, and you just as an adult you're like, man, I had no idea, what those guys were going through or what they were struggling with. Like everything just seemed probably picture perfect, and these guys have all the answers and stuff. So. If anything, it was more, I think, just as an adult looking back and interviewing some of those people and being like, so what was it like when, Jesus Freak was huge or Supernatural? And I think the transparency that a lot of those guys have today is really cool to see. But yeah, as far as my experience, I think with like heavier bands and like smaller bands on the road in that same world, I can't give too much away, but I mean, there's some weird stories in the book
Yeah.
about that aspect of things. But if anything, I think it's just maybe more curious and more understanding. I think too, more accepting and more understanding of the variety of ways that faith can go, I think.
Yeah, awesome. Here's something funny because you said, DC Talk, Audio A, Newsboys, they were all pivotal for you, growing up and getting into music. And it was the same exact thing as me. Like those three bands were the only thing I knew until one day, and this is funny because the friend I'm about to mention's wife just popped in just this second. So one day my friend introduced me to like POD, MXPX, all of these rock bands. So when I look back, like those are some of my favorite bands, the Newsboys, the DC Talk. But when someone asks me who are your favorite bands or artists, I never say them. So it's almost like they're just like on this category off to the side by themselves. Do you kind of feel the same way like that?
Yeah, they're completely in their own world for some reason. But yeah, if you were to look at, like my Spotify playlist or, any sort of numbers on stuff, yeah, I'm sure they'd be fairly, equal. You think of, the amount of times I've listened to like the whole Jesus Freak tape. I'm not even going to say CD, the amount of times I listened to that tape back in the day. Yeah, you're right. I don't say that either. And I think part of that's just, depending on who's asking you too, the relatability of it. If I hate when I ask somebody like, oh, what are some of your favorite movies? And they're a snob and they name, a bunch of things you never heard of. So yeah, I think depending on who's asking, I don't want to be like, well, it's a lot of underground stuff you probably don't know. So yeah, but you're right. I haven't thought of it like that. Those are always to the side. MXPX and POD, I think, do come up a lot as the most influential early on, though. Those were the bands that were like, oh, it's cool to have tattoos and have long hair, and it's like, this is also, I'm seeing this also on like the Christian music video channel, so I guess that's approved of, like, yeah. So those do come up, but you're right. I would probably never, and this sounds so mean, I would probably never say DC Talk or Newsboys in that conversation.
Yeah, and you think about all these artists and all these people that you've interviewed, and like for me, the one that was like, there was like an aura of speaking to them was Toby Mac, and I got to speak to him twice, and I got to interview Kevin Max a few times, and it was just like, whoa, I'm speaking to this person, like they're just like at a whole nother level in your mind, because when you were listening to them as a kid, like that was it. And it just feels different than like, I've interviewed Scott Stapp, who probably is the most famous person I've interviewed. Not really relevant now, but like super famous. And I was like, okay, that was cool. But like Toby Mac, like that was like, whoa. Like,
yeah. Oh, I should have mentioned Scott Stapp earlier. He's definitely been on the wish list for a long time, and come close. Yeah, same thing. Like, gone back and forth, and then it goes cold or something. So.
And that was for a free magazine. So those free magazines work out.
Man, that's huge.
I know you don't have too much time, so I'm gonna hit you with a lightning round of questions, and you gotta go quick.
Okay.
All right. Top 5 bands all time.
Okay. Dashboard Confessional, MXPX, Jimmy Eat World, Amberlin, Taking Back Sunday.
Top 5 vocalists all time.
Oof. Buddy Nielsen from Census Fail. Oh boy. Andrew McMahon from Something Corporate, Jack's Mannequin. I'm still looking around the room here. Josh Scoggin from The Chariot. Chris from Fallstar. And maybe Ben Gibbard from Death Cab.
Wow, you have all your answers. You have the cheat sheets all around you.
I know. I'm having a look around.
All right, top 5 albums all time.
Further Seems Forever, The Moon Is Down. Oh boy. Leading Through the Window, Something Corporate. Bleed American, Jimmy Eat World. Dashboard, Places You've Come to Fear the Most. And Saves the Day, Stay What You Are.
Man, for Further Seems Forever, I'm a Jason Gleason guy. I'm rare. I'm rare, but I am a Jason guy.
He's awesome.
He is. I got to catch them when he did the reunion with them. That was awesome.
I saw Chris perform with him, which was nuts enough. But yeah, to see Jason would be amazing.
Okay, 3 best performing bands you've ever seen.
Oh, Thursday, Let Live, and maybe Circus Survive.
Okay, 3 best interview subjects you've had.
So the 3 best, like my 3 favorite people.
Yeah, that you always get. You always get that amazing story.
Anthony Green from Circa, 100%. I talk a lot about him in the book too, because of those interview stories. I'm cheating again here. Burt McCracken from The Used is always so cool. We'll talk forever. It's great. And then Jason Butler from formerly of Let Live, now The Fever.
Okay, nice. Okay, 3 most underrated bands.
Underrated bands? I mean, I have to say Fallstar, of course. They are. I'm biased, but I do think they're incredibly underrated. I've been listening to Can't Swim, who I mentioned earlier, and then there's a guy named Corey Wells. Also, he's on Pure Noise too. Those 3 deserve a lot more.
And last of the lightning round, most important, maybe the toughest question: where is Machine Gun Kelly from?
Still don't know. I gotta Google it. Wherever the Kardashians are from, I guess. No, Megan Fox. Whoops.
Yeah, wherever Megan Fox is, that's where he is right now.
Yeah, wherever Travis Barker and Megan Fox are.
All right, so the last question for real, and then you can go on with your name dropping life. What do you have coming next? And then plug away. Where can people follow you, listen to your podcast, buy your book? Hit me with all the promotion.
Yeah, so many things. Name dropping is now available in physical copies on Amazon. So it's just digital there for a little while, but you can get it physically now, which is great. Amazon's the best way to do that. The Godspeed podcast is still going strong. I've had to take a break here and there a little bit in doing book promotion and wrapping the book stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go to our latest episode is with Maddie Mullins from Memphis Mayfire.
Nice.
It's a lot of musicians, but also authors. Every once in a while, a comedian as well, entrepreneurs, other podcasters. I really want the podcast to be something where even though there's bigger names on it sometimes, I want to be able to feature other podcasters, other music outlets and stuff. Again, trying to champion the behind the scenes type people. So, but what else? Gosh, I think those are the only 2 things, thankfully. Usually there's 4 or 5 things going on, but I've whittled it down to the book and the podcast for now.
Okay, I feel you. And actually, one more thing.
Yeah.
You said you aren't doing as much writing and freelancing. So what is your main 9 to 5? I guess. And I know there's no such thing when you're a freelancer who's just go.
Yeah. No, I have a very very boring desk job. Boring in the best way possible. So I work for a big boring company during the day, sitting at a computer. So it's, I would say more, but it's not interesting at all. In a great way. But I haven't been freelancing. I write for stuff like New Noise and Outburn here and there. But again, with the book and stuff, I've tried to prioritize a little bit better. And usually I take on way too much because I think I can do it. And then I have to, write somebody back and say, no, I can't do that interview. I can't do that review. So I'm trying to take on less for now, and really let the book hopefully thrive a bit more.
Yeah, we all have our Clark Kent stuff during the day, and the Superman stuff is what you write the book about.
Yeah, everything else is
Clark Kent. Else is just like whatever. All the cool stuff happens at night anyway, just like all the musicians too.
That's right. And I have to say something to Evan Worldwide. I can't tell you how many times I get that comment about naming, if I ever have a son, naming him Ash. When I was about in 6th or 7th grade and Pokemon hit big, it was game over for me. So
game over. Nice. I don't know if that was intentional. Do you even like Pokemon?
I don't hate it. I don't play it or know anything about it.
Ash ruined it for you. If it wasn't for the Ash thing, you might have been interested.
It all sounds cool. Ash Ketchum does sound cool. I'm not mad about that, but
all right, well, thanks, Evan. Evan does like Emery, so that's cool. Those are your friends. And Emery's super dope. But man, I'm gonna let you go because I know you told me you had that. We went a little bit over, which
Totally
it
fine.
always happens. But man, it was a pleasure talking to you and actually getting the face to face with you.
Right?
Everybody, go check out that book, Name Dropping. It's on Amazon. It's amazing. I read it in like 2 days. I love reading books, but I never read them because I don't have time. So this one I read.
Thank
Um,
you.
Thanks, man. Let's keep in touch. This has been
Yeah.
fun.
Dude, thanks, Justin. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, man. Peace.